The day the HOA sent biker thugs to scare my little sister, they walked into the one cafe in town where 3 former Navy SEALs just happened to be sitting with their coffee. They were supposed to intimidate her. They left in handcuffs, and their boss ended up in a jumpsuit. And yeah, it got a lot uglier in the middle. My name's Cole. I grew up in a quiet coastal town in Oregon called Driftwood Bay. The kind of place where people know what truck you drive and how long your grass usually is. We weren't rich, we weren't special, but we had roots. My kid sister, Riley, was the star of the family. Loud laugh, big brain, always the one who insisted on carrying the heavy box even when there were 3 brothers standing right there. She joined the Navy right out of high school, went EOD, the bomb squad, because of course she did. If there was a dangerous job, Riley wanted it. A roadside blast took her legs in her 8th year in. They flew her home with a chest full of ribbons and a body she didn't quite recognize anymore. The day they rolled her off that plane, she squeezed my hand like she was the one comforting me. "Relax, Cole," she said. "I can still outrank you from a chair." That's Riley. She moved back to Driftwood Bay and bought this little 1-story house near the marsh, all ramps and wide doorways and sunlight. The neighborhood had an HOA, but at first it felt like background noise, newsletters about potlucks, notices about trash pickup, passive-aggressive lines about maintaining community standards. Nothing we hadn't seen before. Then we met the president. Her name was Vivian Crane. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect folder of printed rules she carried like a Bible. She'd been running that HOA since forever, and everybody said the same thing. Just don't cross Vivian. It's easier that way. My brothers and I had seen real tyrants, the kind who ordered people killed over radio static, so a woman with a clipboard didn't exactly keep us up at night. But for folks in Driftwood Bay, she was the law. She decided which mailbox colors were acceptable, what curtains looked tidy, who got friendly reminders, and who got fines that could choke a mortgage. People joked about it, but they were scared too. You could see it in the way they pulled their kids a little closer when she walked by. Riley moved in on a Saturday. By Tuesday, she had her first violation. Ramp installed without architectural approval. The ramp the VA paid for. The ramp that made it possible for her to get in and out of her own house without crawling. She rolled the letter between her fingers, eyebrows up. "Guess they missed the part where I can't levitate," she said. I told her we'd take care of it. Talk to the board, file an exception. My brothers, Jace and Hunter, both still active duty at the time, FaceTimed in, already pissed. But Riley, she just smiled that tight little smile she gets when she smells a fight, and said, "It's fine, guys. I've dealt with worse than a bored lady with a laser printer." We thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next month, the letters kept coming. Wrong shade of paint on the mailbox post. Flag too large. Service dog, not properly documented. Decorative planter, not in compliance with visual guidelines. That one was a terracotta pot with rosemary in it. I'm not kidding. Every complaint came with a fine. None of them were huge on their own, but they stacked. Riley kept paying them at first, mostly because she wanted peace and she didn't want to drag anyone into a fight. That's the thing about veterans people don't really talk about. We're trained to endure silently, to drive on, to suck it up. That works great in war. It destroys you in regular life. I came home for good a year after she did. Jace and Hunter rotated stateside a few months later. For the first time since we were teenagers, all 3 Parker brothers and our little sister were in the same zip code again. We spent our first week back in Driftwood Bay fixing Riley's porch, putting up motion lights, building a handrail she could actually trust. We laughed a lot. We cooked too much. Riley pretended not to like it every time we hovered too close to her chair. And then we started noticing things. Neighbors crossing the street instead of walking past Riley's place. Cars slowing down when they saw our truck in her driveway. People who'd known us since we were kids suddenly talking to us like we were trouble. One night at dinner, Riley finally told us why. Vivian had been circling, standing in Riley's yard, measuring this, complaining about that, talking loud enough for neighbors to hear words like non-compliant and potential lawsuit. At the last HOA meeting, she'd apparently held up a photo of Riley's house and said, "This is exactly the kind of thing that lowers property values if we let it slide. Veterans or not, rules are rules. Veterans or not." I'd heard it before in other forms. "You people," said with a polite smile. "Thank you for your service," followed by, "but don't make us uncomfortable." I'd been shoved into enough boxes by people who didn't know the first damn thing about what they'd asked us to do overseas. Now it was happening to Riley, in a town she'd bled for from half a planet away. We tried the polite route. We really did. We scheduled a meeting with the board. We brought Riley's paperwork. VA letters, federal disability regs, every ordinance we could find that trumped HOA guidelines. Vivian listened, nodding slowly, fingers steepled under her chin. Then she said, "I appreciate your service, I really do. But if we start making exceptions, where does it end?" I stared at her. "It ends," I said, "where the law says it ends. You can't find someone for needing a ramp." Her eyes cooled. "This association exists to protect everyone's property values," she said. "Sometimes that means hard choices. I'm afraid if you can't comply with our standards, this might not be the right neighborhood for you." We walked out of that clubhouse with Riley's hands shaking on her wheels, not from fear, from fury she didn't quite know where to put. "I've been blown off rooftops by shockwaves," she muttered. "And a woman with a binder is what finally makes me want to throw something." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about fines anymore. Vivian didn't just want control. She wanted Riley gone. The bikers showed up a week later. It was a Thursday afternoon, ordinary as they come. Riley had physical therapy in town. Then she was going to grab her usual coffee at a little spot on Main called Tide and Grind. It was her place. They had wide aisles, baristas who never stared too long at her chair, and a window seat where she could watch the water and pretend, for 30 minutes, that life was simple again. Jace, Hunter, and I were already there that day, weirdly enough. We just finished a meeting with a contractor about upgrading Riley's bathroom and decided to grab coffee while we argued about tile colors like three old ladies. Riley texted us that she was on her way. We grabbed a table near the back, the way we always do, backs to the wall, sight lines on the door. You can take the seal out of the field, you can't take the field out of the seal. I remember the bell above the door chiming twice. Once when Riley rolled in, hair up in a messy bun, hoodie on, service dog at her side, trident pin on the arm of her wheelchair catching the light. The second time, when trouble walked in after her. 3 of them, leather vests, loud boots, road dust on their jeans, that particular kind of laughter that says, "We want you to know we're here." The leader was a big guy with a gray beard and a gut he still thought was muscle. The patch on his chest said Rafe. The 2 shadows behind him were younger, Jax and Boone, if I remember their patches right. The room changed when they came in. People hunched over their laptops. Conversation thinned out. The barista, a kid named Eli, went pale. He recognized them. You could see it. The way his eyes flicked toward Riley, then the door, like he was calculating if he should hit the panic button under the counter. Rafe swept his gaze around the cafe, taking his time. When his eyes landed on Riley's trident, he slowed. He took her in like she was a problem on a chalkboard he planned to erase. Then he smirked and headed straight toward her table. I felt my brothers go still beside me. That old familiar hum started in my chest, the one that says, "You are 10 seconds away from violence. Choose your next move carefully." Rafe stopped right beside Riley's chair and leaned an elbow on the back of it like it was a bar stool. "Too close. Way too close." Her dog bristled. "Well, look at that," he said, tapping the trident pin with one thick finger. "We got ourselves a war hero." Riley's jaw clenched, but her voice stayed calm. "Can I help you with something?" He chuckled. "You already did," he said. "You moved into a neighborhood with rules you thought don't apply to you. People hire folks like me to solve little problems like that." Every word was just loud enough to carry. He wanted an audience. "Back off," Hunter murmured next to me. I knew what he meant. "Don't rush. Don't make a scene until we know how far this goes." Rafe bent down closer to Riley's ear. I saw her flinch, not from fear, from the smell of stale booze and cigarettes. "Here's how this works, sweetheart," he said. "You start playing nice with the association, or we make it uncomfortable to stay." He bumped her chair as he straightened, just enough to slosh her coffee into her lap. The entire room watched it happen. No one moved. Shame tastes like burned coffee and metal. I could see it in Riley's eyes. She had been humiliated by professionals overseas, interrogated by men with guns and dead eyes. Now some paid thug was trying to do the dollar store version of that with a crowd and a wheelchair. She didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't make a scene. She just looked up at him, wiped the coffee off her jeans, and said quietly, "You touch my chair again, and you and I are going to have a very long conversation about bad decisions." Rafe laughed. "You gonna chase me?" he sneered. "Roll me down." His hand closed around the armrest, knuckles whitening. And that right there, that's when the switch flipped for us. I didn't remember standing. One moment I was at the table, the next I was beside him. Jace and Hunter were a half step behind, like they always had been on 100 other nights in places a lot darker than a coffee shop. "Take your hand off my sister's chair," I said. Not loud, not angry, just done. Rafe turned, still in that half-bent posture, and for a second his eyes did that quick scan men like him always do, counting bodies, measuring size, looking for fear. He didn't find any. What he did see were 3 guys with regulation haircuts, faded tattoos, and the kind of posture you don't get from a gym membership. "Family reunion, huh?" he said. "Cute." He squeezed the armrest harder. Now he was doing it for us, watching to see how far we'd go. Jace stepped in closer, so close their boots almost touched. "You're going to let go," he said, "and you're going to walk out of here. That's your only good option left." Boone shifted behind Rafe, hand twitching toward the chain on his belt. Hunter angled his body just enough to keep all 3 of them in his peripheral vision, that lazy stance that isn't actually lazy at all. Rafe's smile flattened. "You boys think you scare me?" he asked. I shrugged. "Honestly," I said, "I don't care if you're scared. I just care that you move your hand." His eyes flicked to Riley, then back to me. He made his choice. And if I don't? What happened next took maybe 3 seconds. Jace trapped Rafe's wrist, not with force, with angle. A twist, a shift, enough pressure on the joint to make his fingers open by reflex. Hunter slid between Boone and Jax before they could crowd in, one hand on Jax's chest, the other already knocking Boone's arm away as he reached for the chain. I stepped behind Rafe's shoulder and put just enough weight into his center of gravity to tip him backward, guiding him down instead of slamming him. No broken teeth, no blood, just one very surprised thug staring at the ceiling wondering why gravity suddenly hated him. "We're not going to hurt you," I said calmly, pressing his arm into a compliance hold we've all practiced 1,000 times. "But if you try to get back up before I tell you to, I'm going to assume you're dumber than you look." The room finally remembered how to breathe. Somebody gasped. Eli, the barista, used the moment to hit the panic button under the counter. Rafe thrashed once, tried to buck his hips. Jace adjusted his grip, and whatever fight Rafe had left through his teeth in a hiss. Boone took half a step forward out of habit. Hunter just looked at him and said, "Try it." Boone didn't. Jax had already put his hands up. And through it all, Riley just watched. Calm, steady, eyes sharp. "Who hired you?" she asked Rafe. He laughed, even pinned. "Lady's got some bite," he muttered. "You think I'm stupid enough to say it out loud?" "You already did," she said. "You said association when you walked up. And there is only one person in this town arrogant enough to call in bikers over a wheelchair ramp." He shut his mouth. That was all the confirmation we needed. The cops showed up 2 minutes later. Driftwood Bay PD isn't exactly SWAT, but they're not idiots either. They saw 3 restrained guys, no injuries beyond some bruised pride, a room full of witnesses, and a woman in a chair with coffee on her jeans and a trident on her armrest. The calculus was not hard. They cuffed Rafe, Boone, and Jax and took statements from everyone who'd talk. When the officer got to me, I told him the truth. "They put hands on my sister," I said. "We removed the hands. You know how it goes." He nodded. "We do now." 2 days later, a detective from the county showed up at Riley's house. Different vibe completely. Name was Sanchez, mid-40s, calm eyes, the kind of guy who's seen enough stupid to recognize when a situation smells off. He laid his notebook on Riley's kitchen table, glanced at the stack of violation letters she had piled there, and let out a long breath. "So," he said, "you think your HOA president hired a motorcycle club to enforce compliance on disabled residents?" "I'm pretty sure your biker friend already admitted it," Riley said. "You just have to make him say it on paper." Sanchez smiled, just a little. "Working on it," he said. He flipped open his notebook. "Here's the thing, Miss Parker. We've had complaints about this association before. People pressured to sell, weird fines, threats if they didn't cooperate. Nothing concrete enough to stick, nothing anybody would testify to. Until now." I watched Riley process that. The insults, the fines, the ramp wars, suddenly all of it was a piece of something bigger and uglier. It wasn't about her at all. It never had been. Vivian had turned a whole neighborhood into her personal fiefdom, and Riley was just the first one who pushed back hard enough to leave marks. Sanchez took copies of everything. Fines. Emails from Vivian hinting about consequences. Photos of the ramp. He talked to half the block. Funny thing. Once people saw somebody stand up to Vivian and not get crushed, the stories started pouring out. She called my husband unsightly because of his oxygen tank. She told us if we didn't sell to her friend, she'd find violations until we did. She said vets are fine as long as they don't bring their drama home. It took a few weeks, but the tide turned fast after that. Turned out Vivian had been running more than an HOA. She'd been using fines and liens to squeeze people out of their homes, then buying those houses through a shell company and flipping them. Rafe and his boys were just her scarecrow, the noisy part of a quieter scheme. The morning they served the warrant, I stood on Riley's porch with a cup of coffee and my brothers on either side of me. It was early, the kind of gray light only small coastal towns know. Squad cars rolled in quiet. Unmarked sedans pulled up in front of Vivian's neat little Craftsman with the perfectly trimmed shrubs, and the flag hung at exactly the approved height. They walked her out in handcuffs. No yelling, no drama. Just a woman whose kingdom crumbled the second people stopped being afraid of her clipboards. Neighbors watched from their driveways. Some pretended they weren't watching. Most didn't bother pretending. Vivian looked over at Riley's house while they loaded her into the car. Our eyes met across the street. She didn't scream, didn't spit, didn't beg. She just stared like she still couldn't quite believe any of this was happening. In her head, she was still the hero of her story. Riley sat on the porch with her dog at her feet, shoulders relaxed, trident pin catching the morning light. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She just gave the smallest nod, like two chess players acknowledging the end of a long, ugly game. A few months later, the neighborhood looked different. Not the houses. Those still had the same peeling paint and overgrown shrubs and holiday decorations left up too long. What changed was the way people walked. Heads up again. Kids riding bikes without parents yanking them back every time they got near the wrong yard. The HOA didn't vanish. It got rebuilt. New faces, actual votes, rules that made sense and actually bent for things like wheelchair ramps and oxygen tanks in life. Driftwood Bay became what it was always supposed to be, a neighborhood, not a kingdom. Riley still gets looks sometimes. There are still people who think rules are rules, no matter who gets ground down in the gears. There are folks who whisper that we overreacted, that it was just a misunderstanding, that Vivian meant well but went too far. There are even people who think Three Seals shouldn't have laid hands on those bikers, that we should have just let the system handle it. So here's where I want to hear from you. If your HOA president hired biker thugs to shove your injured sister's wheelchair around in a cafe to make a point about the rules, how would you have responded? Do you think we went too far standing up to them, or not far enough? Where's the line between self-defense and overkill when the people abusing power are hiding behind paperwork instead of weapons? And the bigger question, have you ever seen someone like Vivian in your own life? At work, in your building, on your street? Using order and rules as an excuse to bully people who are already carrying more than their share? What did you do? Did anyone stand up? Or did everyone keep their heads down and hope they wouldn't be next? Drop your story in the comments. Tell me if you think HOAs are a necessary evil or just evil. Tell me where you stand on what we did. If you were sitting in that cafe, watching those guys grab my sister's chair, whose side would you be on? The rules are rules crowd, or the people who decided enough was enough?